The night was dark and silent as I began my shift at the old dilapidated mansion that sat atop the hill on the outskirts of town. The mansion had a sinister reputation, with rumors of hauntings and unspeakable horrors that had taken place within its walls. But I needed the job, so I took the position as the night security guard. I mean, how hard could it be to look after an old abandoned building? Plus, it's not like there's any such thing as ghosts anyway. I found it odd that a building not being used or lived in would need security. When Mr. Phillips, my boss at the security agency, gave me this assignment, he explained that the property was owned by some old recluse. He was independently wealthy and used to live there years ago. Now, he refuses to sell it and pays us to keep people out. Who knows why? As I patrolled the mansion's dimly lit corridors, I couldn't help but shake a certain feeling of unease, almost like I was being watched. I told myself that it was all in my mind. It was just this big, creepy building playing tricks on my mind. I checked my watch. It was only 10 p.m. This was going to be a long night. My flashlight flickered briefly, and he cursed under his breath as I smacked it against my palm to get it working again. I continued my rounds, my footsteps echoing eerily through the empty halls. Suddenly, the window blew open and a freezing wind swept through the hallway. My flashlight went completely dead. Quickly, I moved to close the window. Just as I was locking it back up, I heard a loud thud at the other end of the hallway. I slammed the flashlight against my palm, but to no avail. That's when I saw it, a shadowy figure at the end of the hall. I could barely make it out in the darkness, but it was tall, and its body seemed twisted and distorted. My heart pounded as I approached it cautiously. "Who's there?" I called out, trying to keep my voice from quivering. There was no response, just the sound of the figure's ragged breathing. I took another step closer, my hands shaking. As I got nearer, I realized the figure was not alone. It was surrounded by other shadowy forms, all writhing and contorting in unnatural ways. Panic welled up inside me as I stumbled backward, my mind unable to comprehend what I was seeing. The figures began to advance, slowly but steadily. I turned and ran, my footsteps echoing through the mansion as I desperately tried to escape. But no matter which direction I turned, the figures were always there, closing in on me. I burst into a room, slamming the door behind me and locking it. I leaned against the door, gasping for breath, trying to make sense of what was happening. The room was small and dimly lit, with old decaying furniture covered in dusty sheets. For a moment, I thought I could be safe, but then I heard a voice whispering in my ear. It was a chilling, otherworldly voice that seemed to come from all directions at once. "You can't hide," the voice hissed. "We've been waiting for you." I spun around, looking in all directions, but there was no one there. I was alone in the room, or so it seemed. Suddenly, the sheets on the furniture began to stir, and I watched in horror as they slowly rose into the air, forming grotesque, shadowy figures that surrounded him. Terrified, I backed into a corner, my mind racing for a way out. The figures closed in, their forms shifting and contorting as they reached for me. I could feel their icy cold touch, and it sent a shock of fear through my entire body. In a desperate bid for survival, I pulled out his phone and dialed 911. But as I brought it to my ear, all I heard was that same chilling voice. "No one can save you now," it whispered. Suddenly, the room plunged into darkness, and I was engulfed by the shadowy figures, their distorted forms pressing in on him from all sides. I screamed as they enveloped me, their cold, otherworldly presence consuming me entirely. I'm still here in this mansion to this day. I'm with the others now, and we wait for whoever is foolish enough to step foot in this house.
My daughter, Emily, had always been a shy and sensitive child. She was short and skinny for her age, and she had been born with a severe, lazy eye. This made her easy prey for some of the crueler children at school. I tried my best to protect her, to build her self-confidence. But kids can be cruel, and their taunts had taken a toll on her. It all started when Emily found the doll, a porcelain doll with raven black hair and eyes that seemed to pierce through your soul. It was a beautiful, albeit eerie thing, and Emily had fallen in love with it the moment she saw it at the antique shop. I thought it was harmless, and maybe just what a lonely child in need of a friend might need. But strange things began to happen after Emily brought the doll home. At first, it was subtle, a whispered conversation with the doll in her room, and hushed laughter in response to an unseen joke. I chalked it up to an active imagination, nothing out of the ordinary. But soon, it became evident that there was more I should be worried about. Emily's demeanor changed. She became increasingly withdrawn, spending all her time with that doll. Her grades began to slip, and eventually, she refused to go to school altogether. When I asked her what was wrong, she would simply stare at me with glassy, unblinking eyes and say, "Dolly says I don't need school, Mommy." Worse still, the bullies who had tormented Emily at school started experiencing strange misfortunes. First, it was a simple accident, a scraped knee here, a twisted ankle there. But then, it escalated. One of the boys who had been particularly cruel to Emily fell down a flight of stairs and broke his arm. Another girl was inexplicably hit by a bicycle and ended up in the hospital. I tried to dismiss it as a bizarre coincidence, but whenever these incidents occurred, the doll's expression seemed to somehow change, almost like it was smirking. It was as if the doll reveled in the pain and suffering of those who had hurt my daughter. One evening, as I was tucking Emily into bed, I noticed something different about the doll. Its once pristine porcelain face was now marred by cracks, and its eyes had turned completely black. Emily noticed my concern and said, "Don't worry, Mommy. Dolly is just getting stronger. She's protecting me." I couldn't take it any longer. I decided to put an end to whatever dark influence the doll had over my daughter. I entered Emily's room late one night, the dim glow of the nightlight casting eerie shadows across its face. "Emily," I said softly, "we need to get rid of the doll. It's not good for you." Emily's eyes widened, and she clutched the doll protectively. "No, Mommy. You can't take Dolly away. She's my friend." I reached out to take the doll from her, and that's when it happened. Emily let out a high-pitched scream that took me aback. She'd never acted out like this before. Before I could react, she slapped me across the face and jumped up on the bed. I tried to pry the doll away from her, but she clung tight, letting out a high-pitched, mocking laughter while tears streamed down her face. For the first time, I was truly scared of my daughter. Finally, I ripped the doll away from her and threw it to the ground as hard as I could. The doll shattered to pieces, Emily's manic laughing coming to a sudden, alarming stop. "You shouldn't have done that, Mommy," she said coldly. I cleaned up the shattered doll and told her that this was all for the best. That someday she'd understand that. But our troubles weren't over yet. One evening, as I was preparing dinner, I heard Emily's voice coming from her room. She was talking to someone or something. I rushed to her room and found her sitting on the floor. Her eyes were vacant, and she whispered in a voice that sent shivers down my spine. "Dolly is still here, Mommy. She's not gone." At school, things only got worse for Emily's bullies. Things hit the tipping point when one girl who had been particularly mean to her in the past suddenly slipped on the sidewalk as she passed Emily and fell into the street. A car that was passing by was barely able to swerve in time to prevent hitting the poor girl. I took Emily to a psychiatrist, but by then she was too far gone. The sweet, angelic girl I had raised was gone, and what was left was cold, stoic, with an uncontrollable rage boiling inside her. I wish we had never bought that doll. Then I would still have my little girl. It had to be the doll. My daughter couldn't truly be evil. Could she?
The sea had always called to me, its vastness and mystery drawing me in like an irresistible siren song. I was never afraid of the water. In fact, I felt more at home on a boat than I did on land. It was a bright and clear morning when I set out on my small sailboat, the salty breeze whipping through my hair. I had planned a solo voyage, a few days of solitude on the open water to clear my mind. I had provisions, navigation equipment, and a radio for emergencies. I thought I was prepared for anything. As the day wore on, I watched the shore grow smaller and smaller on the horizon until it disappeared entirely. The endless expanse of the ocean stretched out before me, a boundless canvas of blue. I felt a sense of freedom and peace wash over me as I let the boat gently rock me to sleep under a blanket of brilliant stars. But when I awoke, something was terribly wrong. The sky was dark, and a thick, rolling fog had descended upon the water, obscuring my view in all directions. Panic gripped me as I realized I had no idea where I was. My navigation equipment had gone haywire, and my radio emitted nothing but static. I scanned the horizon, but there was no sign of land, just an endless gray void. My heart raced as I desperately tried to recall my training, attempting to calculate my approximate position based on the time and my last known coordinates. But the numbers blurred together in my mind, and I was left with nothing but confusion. Hours turned into days as I drifted aimlessly into the fog. I rationed my supplies, but my food and water were running low. The once calm sea grew restless, and the boat bobbed violently in the unpredictable waves. Loneliness and desperation gnawed at my sanity. One night, as I huddled in the cabin, clutching the last of my food, I heard it, a haunting, mournful sound that echoed through the fog. I had heard whale songs before, but this was something different. I had never heard anything like this before. It sent a chill down my spine. I peered out into the gray abyss, trying to locate the source of the sound, but there was nothing to see. The wailing grew louder and closer as I tried to prepare myself for whatever might come out of that fog. It was a lamentation, a dirge that seemed to come from the depths of the ocean itself. I felt a presence, something ancient and malevolent lurking beneath the waves, and it filled me with dread. The days stretched into weeks, and the fog never lifted. The strange wailing continued, tormenting me day and night. Sleep became an elusive luxury, and I was haunted by nightmares of monstrous sea creatures rising from the depths to drag me under. I became gaunt and hollow-eyed, a mere shell of the person I had once been. One day, as I stared out into the fog, I saw a shadowy figure moving on the water's surface. It was indistinct, like a mirage, but it was undeniably there. My heart sank as I watched it draw closer. It was a grotesque, tentacled creature, its form constantly shifting and writhing. It had luminous, malevolent eyes that seemed to pierce into my very soul. I screamed and tried to turn the boat away, but it was too late. The creature reached out with its tentacles, wrapping them around the boat and pulling it beneath the waves. I was plunged into the icy darkness, the water closing in around me. Panic surged as I fought to escape, but the tentacles held me tight. I watched in horror as the surface grew farther and farther away, the sunlight fading into nothingness. As it pulled me down, I struggled for the knife on my hip holster. Unsheathing it, I plunged it repeatedly into the beast's tentacles. It was all I could try to do to escape. My energy quickly drained and I could feel myself losing consciousness. I forced myself to stay awake and keep stabbing the creature. Finally, I was released, the tentacles withdrawing and the creature disappearing into the black depths. I swam desperately for the surface, my lungs burning with the need for air. Miraculously, I broke through, gasping for breath as I bobbed on the surface of the sea. I was rescued by a passing ship, the crew pulling me from the water, their faces a mix of disbelief and pity. I later found out that I had been lost at sea for months, far longer than I realized. I couldn't explain what had happened to me, the horrors I had witnessed, the malevolent presence that had taken me. To this day, I cannot forget the terror of those endless days adrift in the fog, the haunting wails, and the eldritch creature that lurked in the depths. The sea had shown me its true, unforgiving nature, and I knew I would never be the same again. The call of the ocean that had once been my siren's song was now a haunting, chilling melody that would forever haunt my nightmares.